Napoleon Hill talks about our imagination being the workshop of our mind, or the playground, right? The playground of our mind. That we begin to play in this playground of our imagination and start letting yourself imagine different possibilities.
Hey, it's Rocky. Welcome to Richer Soul. Today's guest is Felicia Searcy, who will share universal laws that will allow you to achieve your dreams. Imagine it's 12 months from now, and you've achieved your major life goals. How does it feel to be in the best shape of your life? To wake up energized, excited about the day? To have great relationships and friends who support you and propel you forward? How does it feel to have an excess of money, to be able to make the choices you want? To be fearless and open to trying new adventures? Imagine being connected to the universe and it providing everything you desire. It's possible over time, and your past does not dictate your future. The only thing holding you back from this vision is you. It's time to take control of our thoughts and use them to our advantage. Welcome to Richer Soul, where we achieve our dreams and bring balance to health, wealth, relationships, time, and spirituality. If you have not had a chance to listen to episodes 1 through 9, I encourage you to go back and listen to the framework behind Richer Soul and how to create the life of your dreams. You can also find all the show notes for this episode at richersoul.com. While you're there, you can sign up for a monthly email where I share the best articles I read this month, let you know about upcoming episodes, and share a little wisdom. You can also listen to coaching calls under the Coaching Calls tab. I also share the most interesting articles I read every week on Facebook at facebook.com/Richer Soul. And there's also a Facebook group where you can ask questions and interact with other listeners. Today's quote is from Joseph Campbell. The goal of life is to make your heartbeat match the beat of the universe, to match your nature with nature. That's our topic today as we chat how to be in alignment with the universe. It's funny, I can't see the wind, but I know how powerful it is. I can't see radio waves, but I can hear the radio. Have you ever wondered what else was out there and what could be happening if you could tap into it? I find natural laws and powers are rarely talked about in depth and understood by many people. Just like the thought that the Earth was the center of the universe, and if you didn't believe it, you were crazy. Times have changed. It's time for another turning. We're going to talk about universal laws and how they can help you achieve your goals. But first, you need to know what your goals are. Isn't that what we talked about in the last episode? What do you want? Age-old question. Felicia's purpose is her passion to empower you to discover and express your extraordinary life, the one that rockets your impact personally and for others. As the Impact Multiplier, she has sourced the secrets for living life big, fully out, fully connected, fully joyous, fully prosperous. Who doesn't want that? She is a 4-time award-winning transformation coach, international speaker, author, and minister who has helped thousands create a path for living their dream life. For more than 20 years, Felicia has worked with people from all walks of life who are seeking a spiritual component that accelerates success. Let's meet Felicia. Welcome to Richer Soul, Felicia Searcy. It's great to have you join us today.
It's so great to be here today, Rocky. Thank you for having me.
I'm excited for the conversation. We always like to start at the beginning. What was it like when you were growing up, and how much did your family and school teach you about money?
Yeah, that's a really fascinating question. It's a good question. So my background is, and, I was sharing this a little bit with you, before we get started. It was dark. Both my parents struggled with mental illness, there was addiction, there was a terrific amount of violence in my household. So, with money being in the mix, what I learned that life was not safe. Don't ask for too much. And to not expect much. And, it was also really interesting phenomenon with money because there was also this underlying message, that this underlying message, beneath everything, where there was a belief that poverty was nobility, that it was a way to get closer to God. And so I grew up in a spiritual tradition where I'll never forget. So this is the background. I was in third grade and the religious teacher came into the classroom and he stood at the front of the classroom and he held out a nickel and he held out a quarter. And he said, "Which one do you want?" And he said, "Oh, by the way, God's offering the nickel and the devil's offering the quarter." And so I'm in the back of the classroom raising my hand saying, "Call on me." And he didn't call on me. I'll never forget. He called on this girl named Mary Ann, and she went up to the front and immediately went for the nickel. And his response was just wired into me. He literally patted her on the head and said, "Well done, good and faithful daughter." Because if he would have called on me, I was heading straight for hell because I was going for that quarter, right? And it was just such a powerful message. And it was reinforced at home that there's just something inherently wrong with having money, that bad, greedy people get it dishonestly and they're selfish and they have money. And even in the midst of all of the violence and all of the illness, there was this sense of we're holy because we're poor. So that was my introduction to money, and it colored everything forward until I, began to learn a different way.
Do you know where that came from in school? Like, what was the principle behind that?
I don't know. Okay. I don't mean to laugh, but it's, again, it was my tradition, and it's a pretty prevalent tradition around the world, that just somehow there was just a belief that, one of the things that I remember being taught was that, we carried our cross for God, that suffering brought us closer to God. So I don't know. I never really felt the need to try to go figure out the origins of that. I just wanted to change it. And know God differently, know this spiritual presence, this creative force differently.
And I've got to believe if you grow up with that mentality, you will never have money. And if money happens to come your way, you'll get rid of it quickly. Yeah,
it's been a profound work of mastery to learn and really come into a deep ownership of a different way of being. Because it wasn't even so much before I found spiritual principle, universal law, that I would try to get rid of it. I didn't even allow myself to have it. I went to college. I, got a degree in education and speech pathology. And then I went to work. I graduated in Louisiana. And so I went to work in one of the poorest parishes. We called counties in Louisiana were called parishes. Went to work for one of the poorest parishes in the poorest school, thinking that I was being noble. While at the same time, afraid to spend 50 cents to dry my clothes. And I'm in Louisiana where the humidity is 100%. And I've got stuff hanging around my apartment because I'm too terrified to spend the 50 cents to put in the dryer. So it was just such a disconnect. But there was just something so inherent in me that said having money was inherently wrong. And so I didn't do anything to pursue it. In fact, I did everything to make sure I didn't have it.
So how did you overcome that?
Yeah, that's a great question. There was a point in time where I just became desperate. I felt so overwhelmed by the pain, by the despair, by the frustration, by the shame, the unworthiness, that I really began to toy with whether or not I even wanted to stay on this side of things. And I go back to my tradition of birth. I'm grateful that they had like I don't know, a spiritual law. I don't know if you would call it that or not. But if I were to have committed suicide, I wouldn't have been able to be buried in the cemetery. It was a mortal sin. I don't know why that mattered to me, but I just kept seeing my parents, standing on the outside of that gate trying to figure out where to bury me. And it's like, okay, I can't do that. And it was in that moment of deep vulnerability, right, that we're accessible to something different. When I became introduced to a whole new way of thinking. And I'll never forget, I went to like a training, like a lecture. And I remember the instructor saying that you are a child of the divine, worthy of all good things. You are worthy. And I can remember literally recoiling from that and almost like looking around, wondering if lightning was going to strike because it was blasphemous, that saying that I'm worthy. But there was something in me that woke up. There was something in me that resonated so deeply with that I thought, oh my God, I've got to find out more about this. And that's when I began my journey, my study, just immersing myself in anything I could get my hands on that was aligned with this new way of thinking. And the more I worked with it, and the more I stared down the voice that said you're unworthy, the more I stared down the voice that said suffering is the way, quote, to God, the more I was able to entertain new possibilities for myself and really begin to allow those new possibilities. And I started stacking the evidence, building a case for a fact of a loving divine presence and the awareness that there truly are these immutable laws that govern our results, that I can work with those. And the more I did that, the more I changed, the more my world changed. And it's just, you got to have a telescope. You have to have the Hubble telescope to see where I was compared to where I am now. And I got on fire with this because I knew there were other people that were suffering like I was and wanted to help other people understand that our teachings from very well-intended people that were just not accurate, to help them understand that they don't have to be defined by their history or what they were taught or their childhood, and that we truly can create something different. So that's how I overcame it. And I'm still overcoming it, right? Every turn up the spiral, there's another little dust bunny that wants to rise up and say, okay, let's go after that one.
How old were you when you started that part of the journey?
22.
So still relatively young.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'll be 63 on Wednesday. So it's been
long journey.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like an aha and all of a sudden the light switch turned on. It took work to make the change or to actually be the new person.
Well, and what's so great about that statement, right, what you just said, is that it was enough of an aha to want to be dedicated to the journey and to get beyond being addicted to inspiration to true transformation. So it was like one or two moments where it was this, wow, there really is a different possibility here. And then realizing that inspiration is not enough to make the real necessary transformation. Inspiration is required to get on the path. And then you're right, then it's the deep rigor of working with these laws in a way that creates the transformation that we desire.
What did you mean by addicted to inspiration?
Yeah, what I see with so many people is that, when you're in an environment, so you're listening to this, and hopefully you're gaining some value from it. And I know you're gaining value from Rocky. So, hopefully you're gaining value from what I'm sharing. And what happens is that people will come to me and they'll say, oh, Felicia, that was so inspiring. And something inside of them wakes up. They mistake that moment of inspiration, of that flutter in your heart, or that feeling of, wow, I really can do anything. They mistake it for true transformation. So people end up trying to chase that feeling of inspiration without doing the deep work where it moves from inspiration to deep well-being. And so it's a way of of avoiding really having to dig in and do the work, but yet nothing changes. And so they think the feeling is enough, and it's not. So that's what I mean by being addicted to inspiration.
They're constantly looking for positive feedback, but they're never making the internal changes.
Yeah, they're constantly looking for that feeling of aliveness, but they're not doing the work to generate it from themselves, and really become that person that is living at that state of awareness.
So you've mentioned these universal laws. Can you explain what these are?
Yes, and I'm gonna give a caveat that yes, I've studied this for 40 years, and my understanding continues to grow. I know that there's so much amazing information out there. I know enough to believe in these laws. I know enough to apply these laws. I don't understand the exact intricacies of it, but I don't have to understand electricity to be able to flip the switch and get light, right? I just have to understand how to activate electricity and to work on my behalf. So when I talk about universal laws, many people, most people have heard of, like the core law of the law of attraction. It is actually a secondary law. The real law is the law of vibration. What I have come to understand is that there are immutable laws that are as real as gravity, that are as real as electricity, that actually govern our results. One of the primary principles in this is understanding that we, as thinking, evolving, intentional, deliberate beings, have been given this unprecedented gift to be able to actually imagine different possibilities for ourselves, that we've been given this remarkable capacity, this faculty called our imagination. Now, when we're running movies in our imagination, we are actually activating a physiological sensation in our bodies. These are feelings. Those feelings literally have a vibration. There's a frequency to them. And there's an institution called HeartMath that has created an instrument that can literally measure our energy field 6 feet out. Doesn't mean that our energy field doesn't go further out than 6 feet. That's just as far as we can measure it. Think of it this way. When we walk into a room, if you walk into a room, let's say you walk into a kitchen and there's two people in that kitchen, and moments before they were just going at it. I mean, just fighting. And then they split up and one's rummaging in the cabinet and one's rummaging in the refrigerator. And you walk in and you can feel the tension. In fact, we have a saying for it. I could cut the tension with a knife. What are you picking up on? You're picking up on their energy. Now, the reason why this is so important is because what quantum physics are now proving is that we live and move and have being in a field of energy where there are waves of unformed energy hanging out, what they call superposition. I don't understand. This is the part that I don't understand how this happens. But what more and more people are proving is that what we are predominantly transmitting, the vibration, our energetic signature of how we see ourselves and what we expect from life, is now informing the images in our imagination, the movie that we're running. This is now being impressed into this field, and it becomes this attractive force, this magnetic force to bring to us that which is aligned with what we predominantly believe about life, running images in our imagination to match that, what we expect, and how we see ourselves. Now, there's lots of other laws, the law of reciprocity, the law of sufficiency, the law of circulation, the law of forgiveness. And obviously that's a much deeper conversation. But this is the primary one. It's the foundational one around which all other laws then evolve. And so basically understanding that there truly are laws that are directing the results in our life. And we're always working with those laws. We can't turn them off, but we can learn how to work with them intentionally and deliberately.
Why isn't this talked about more?
Well, here's what I love about this, right? That it's people like you are bringing on people like me, and that it's becoming much more into the conversation. I think one of the reasons why it's not talked about like a whole lot, and there's a lot of people out there trying to debunk it, it's because it's so hard to wrap our heads around the fact that there is an invisible principle, an invisible power, these invisible laws, an invisible force at work in our lives and at work in our world. And so it can feel, I have come to love the word nonsense, right? You know, people say that's nonsense. What I love about that word is that it's effectively telling us to go beyond the five senses, that we have been so trained to trust the information that our five senses gives us. And so when someone is offered something like this, saying, yeah, but there really is an invisible field around us, that our thinking impacts our invisible field, it's like science fiction. And I think the vast majority where we are today has a difficult time believing that. But if you think back to the Jetsons, and, Rosie the robot, and they had those floating vehicles. And, I'm going to, I already told you my age, but I'm going to share, show you my era. Get Smart talked into his shoe, or talked into his watch. Those things were fantastical 40, 50, 60 years ago. Now they're part of our routine. And so it's coming into a believing that this really is true. And I think people are afraid to believe this. Did you know it took the world 5 years to believe that the Wright brothers actually flew? 5 years before it was in our collective consciousness that we could actually fly. And people wanted to outlaw electricity when it first got hooked up because it scared them, right? And so I think it's a matter of, what do they call it? Like the 100th monkey, the tipping point, that the more of us that can really dedicate our lives to understanding these laws, believing these laws, and applying them intentionally, the more people will come to trust that, in fact, it can actually work for them, and the more that this will spread. And it's already spreading so much. I mean, this has become such a wonderfully common conversation.
And you are correct. It is spreading, and the conversation is continuing to grow. I think the easiest way that I do to wrap my head around it is I look outside and I can see all these things. There's one thing I can't see: wind. Yeah. And yet the wind that there's no mass to whatsoever, at least none that I can see, can blow something over.
That's it. You can see the impact of the wind, but
I can see the impact, but I can't see the wind. And so to me, that is just kind of that aha of there's more out there than meets the eye.
Well, think of it this way. I'm talking into a square box, right? I've got this square box called my computer, and I'm talking into this microphone right here. And you're in Pennsylvania, and I'm in Tucson, and what are we doing? We're talking over these invisible waves, and we're at a particular frequency, because there's all these different frequencies in my office, just like there's all these different frequencies in your office. And we have come into harmony with that same frequency. So now we can see each other and we can talk to each other over Zoom. We believe that because we can see it, right? So one of the things that I help my clients understand is the power of building a case for it. Stack the evidence that there truly is something at work that you can't necessarily define. Do the steps that I'm sharing with you to do, and then stack the evidence that, in fact, there's power at work in our lives.
Today's episode is sponsored by Profit Answer Man Podcast. Did you know that most small business owners hate looking at their financials? It's one reason they may struggle with business success. The Profit Answer Man podcast helps them ensure they are profitable and can pay their employees and weather the storms we all have to face. It's built on the Profit First methodology of pay yourself first. The Profit Answer Man podcast is a must listen to for every small business owner and anyone who wants to help them survive and thrive. Check it out on your favorite listening platform. So how do we tap into this invisible power and use it to our benefit?
It's a great question. So one of the things that I encourage people to start with is just do an experiment with it. So the first thing, so if we really believe, and when I'm talking to groups of people, whether it's 550, 500, I don't know that I've ever spoken to 5,000, but I have spoken to 1,000. I'll ask, raise your hand if you believe that your thinking has something to do with your results. And almost every hand in the audience goes up, right? Because we can't live in our world today and not hear that in some way, shape, or form, unless you're, living under a rock someplace. If we really believed that, then we would be so diligent in what we're feeding our imagination. So the place to start is to start building out images that really bring you alive. And the question that I encourage people to start working with, the most potent, powerful, truly holiest of all questions that we can work with is, what would I love? What would I love? What would I love to do, have, give, be? What would I love? When you begin to work with the question, what would I love? You're actually tapping into an infinite stream of intelligence. It's the intelligence that wove us into existence. And you let it inform images that when you think about them, you go, oh, wow, I would love that. Now, there's a part of you that's not going to believe it because it's beyond anything you've ever known for yourself before. But the place to start, Napoleon Hill talks about our imagination being the workshop of our mind, or the playground, right? The playground of our mind, that we begin to play in this playground of our imagination and start letting yourself imagine different possibilities. That alone is such an act of courage and vulnerability, just to really be present for what is it that is seeking to come alive through you. So that, first of all, the place to start is build a believing that these laws actually work. And then to start letting yourself play in the playground of your imagination of, wow, if I really could make it up any way I want to, what would I love for it to be? Understanding that we're making it up all the time anyway.
That we are. And I think where people struggle is people just think, well, if I think about it, it'll just happen. But there's actual work to be done, correct?
Well, and here's the thing is that we can have anything that we can come into harmony with. And what people mistake is an occasional whimsical thought is not a steady identification with it. So my husband just walked in. How do I know? Because he walked in singing. He usually does that, right? We've been together for over 36 years. I am so wired to be married. I am energetically identified with the state of being married. I organize my world around being in partnership with my spouse. Now, the reason I bring that up is because when it's a bigger dream, a bigger desire than anything you've ever known for yourself before, it's not your normal. It's not your routine. And so you may, from time to time, think about it. Well, and if we're not diligent about it, then the mind will go back to the status quo of whatever currently is. My mind never goes back to being single. I haven't been single in 36 over. It's coming up on 37 years. I haven't been single in that length of time. And so my mind doesn't even know what single looks like anymore. Right? Same thing with money, that today I don't even entertain. Now, every once in a while I get a wild hair to go. I live in Arizona. And so, you put anything out and it's dry in 5 minutes because we don't have any humidity. I'm in the middle of the desert. But I don't think about drying my clothes because I can't afford to put them in the dryer, right? That it's not even part of my conversation. That's no longer my status quo. So the work goes beyond an occasional looking at your vision board and thinking about your vision, and really working with it until it becomes a normal state before your world gives you permission. And the way we do that is that you have the vision, and then you're not only are you seeing the vision in your imagination, but you are identifying with and as the person who achieved that there's a feeling, there's an identification, there's an expectation that happens when you really believe that this is possible. That's where the rigor comes in. And from that state, now you have access to ideas and opportunities that have always been there, but we can't see them coming from the state of same old, same old. So the work is to not only see the vision, but to put on the identity of the man or the woman that's living that vision, and to think in terms of ideas and opportunities that are available from that state of imagining, that state of awareness. And then you take action. You take massive imperfect action, because you're believing more in the dream than you are in what your current life is.
Where do people get stuck?
There's several places along the line that people get stuck. One of them is just really letting themselves hear what it is that they really want. You think that what would you love sounds like such a like a preschool question, such an elementary question. It's one of the most difficult questions that we can ask. And so people get stuck really, first of all, just letting themselves know what it is that they really want, because there's all these reasons why it can't happen, or all these reasons why it seems irresponsible. And so they start dreaming, and then they let who they are today impose what they have seen is possible up to that point on their dream, on their desire, on that soul's calling, and they start watering down the thing that they really want. Here's an issue. Here's the issue with a watered down desire. You're not going to give it everything that is required to really move it forward. And it's like turning the dimmer switch down. It's like an almost it, that it's kind of it. And I should be happy with this, but I'm not really happy with it. So that's the first place. Then when people give themselves permission, and this is the deep work that we do, to really hear what it is that they want, then they may not necessarily believe that it can happen for them. And if you don't believe it can happen for you, you're not going to act on it. They don't necessarily see that they are capable of achieving it. And here's the thing I tell them: who they are today is not capable. They're not capable. And there is that in them that's dormant, that as we say yes to the dream, the desire, this heart and soul calling, what we're really saying yes to is developing those qualities, those elements, those characteristics of ourselves that is the person who can do this. And that's the whole reason for this desire. It's not to achieve things. It's to wake you up to more of your magnificence. And so people get stuck in really knowing what the dream is, then they get stuck in the believing, and then they get stuck in the taking of the action. And when you understand the origin, you understand who you really are, you understand what you're connected to, you begin to take action. Then they get stuck in the disappointment, because not every action is a gold-plated action. And so to learn how to navigate and manage that disappointment and do what I call stack your micro wins, to see that, yeah, there are times when things may not be working out, and simultaneously, side by side, there are some amazing things happen. Where are you going to place your attention? So those are the primary places that I see people get stuck.
I'm amazed at how few people can answer the question, what do you want?
Yeah, I know, it's crazy, but not. Right? So many of us, I mean, like me, my third grade lesson, when the priest was at the front of the room saying that God wants you to have a nickel. God wants you to have less than what the devil has. And if so here's the crazy thing, right? Well, I don't need to get off on that, but it's, So, and I remember growing up that there was so much need in my family, and, my siblings just really struggled. And so when I would go to my dad and I'd ask him for like dance lessons or piano lessons or something like that, he would go down the list. I was one of 5 in my core family, and then one of 9. And when my parents split up and I got step siblings and a half brother, he would go down the list in terms of why everybody was in greater need than I was. So I learned to stop asking. I learned to stop expecting. I learned that it was selfish to ask or to expect. And that if I got what I wanted, then somebody else would be deprived. And I think that, women in particular really struggle with this, of it not being selfish, of it not being taken it away from somebody else, that we should be happy with what we have. And so people stop dreaming. They stop asking. They stop expecting. And so it's a whole new world for them. And it's scary. Just like when I first heard this minister, this teacher talk about, I'm worthy. Every cell in my being got terrified at the very thought of that, while really recognizing it. And so people want what they want, but there's a lot of layers that we got to work through to get there.
How does everything that you're talking about also fit in when people run a business?
Oh, yeah. Because I work primarily with entrepreneurs, right? So here's the thing to understand. That heart's calling, that desire, and I'm answering your question here, Rocky. That desire is actually not our desire. It is a life force energy, the very energy that created us, seeking to grow us and to grow its presence in our world through the activation of our desire. That when we live into our desire, we're actually bringing more good into our world. So when people come to me saying that they have a desire, a dream to build a business, what they're really saying is, I am called with deep purpose. I know I'm meant to make a bigger difference, and I want to make that difference with my business. If we can't allow good into our lives, if we cannot, number one, get super clear on what is it that we really want, and we can't open up and allow ourselves to experience a greater degree of freedom, experience a greater degree of abundance, of fulfillment, we can't serve. We're not able to share our gifts. And so if you stop the flow of good, you stop the flow of service.
And so they fit together. I think a lot of people look at them as separate. And I always look at business being an extension of the business owner. You bring yourself into the business. And so it's important that you yourself be on a solid foundation, because if you're not, your business is going to cause something to crumble somewhere.
That's it. What's interesting that when, I've done 3 businesses, and the first one that we did, my husband and I did together, we purchased a franchise. And he ran it. It was automotive repair, and he primarily ran it. And I, did pieces here and there. And when we first started this, we were so clear on our purpose. We had a very clear vision, purpose statement, values, and it truly was service-based, that we were here to serve the community. And it was, we were a rarity that from the first month out of the gate, we were in the black. And we saw other franchise owners just really, really struggling. And I really believe it's because we came from purpose. Same thing with, this business, my speaking coaching business. Less than 10% of coaches cross the 6-figure mark. My company has generated millions of dollars over the years, for which I'm deeply grateful for. And the thing that I'm really grateful for is how every single penny that comes into my bank account represents somebody's life who's being impacted. When we're able to ground ourselves and really understanding purpose first, service first, right? Then, and realize that our business is an extension of our own personal mission statements, our own personal visions of the impact that we're able to make. That's when we make the biggest difference. And that's when we're able to open up to the flow. When people build a business strictly to make money, I'm not saying it's not possible. And people do it. People do it all the time. But I don't see the soul satisfaction with people that are building businesses strictly for the sake of building businesses. And so absolutely, our business is a reflection of fundamentally what we believe about ourselves and what we believe is possible and about life.
And when you deal with business owners who think like this, you can see a difference in the way that they serve. You can see in the difference in the way that you are treated. And as you said, it's just night and day. And yes, people can make money in business, but if they don't enjoy what they're doing, just like anything else in life, it becomes drudgery. And then you stop paying attention to the business. And then, of course, the business goes south.
Yeah, or coming from a place of urgency that you got to build this business in order to be okay because you need the money, right? That get mentality. Let me get clients. Let me get business in order for me to be okay. It's backwards, because in that scenario, now you're trying to get people to help you by giving you their money in exchange for your service. But when you really get that you have this profound gift to offer that's going to make a profound difference in the life of somebody else, and you understand that abundance flows from that relationship, now you're in a state of fulfillment, you're in a state of joy, you're in a state of presence, of gratitude, and you're open for the abundance, the riches that are seeking you.
It sounds like you finally overcome the money stories. Although I still feel like they're there.
Well, here's the thing, and this is the thing that I help my folks understand. We're in a constant turn up an evolutionary spiral, right? And so we don't ever want them to go away completely, because every time we dream into a new edge of possibility, those old stories are going to pop up for another layer of transformation. And if we're not poking them, then we're no longer dreaming big and bold. And so right now it's a fascinating thing that I'm on this next turn of my own evolution. And so they pop up, and rather than, oh my God, it's like, wow, here I go. I'm at the edge of my next edge of my own becoming. So of course they're going to wake up. And so I actually tell my folks to celebrate it. When those fears and doubts and worries want to make themselves known, you want to celebrate that, because it's evidence that you are willing to dream into a whole new edge of possibility for yourself.
I like it. It's time to learn the secrets of life. What's your secret to living an abundant life?
Gratitude, deep and profound gratitude. And I say that hesitantly because it can be such a cliche. Gratitude is a master skill that when you're in the midst of things not exactly working out, or it's the mundane, that we can get so sucked into, what am I trying to say? The status quo and just getting her done. And so gratitude, bringing myself back to the riches of my life here and now, is just, it's a game changer.
I think it's the number one answer to the question.
Yeah.
From all the people we've asked, and it's not surprising. What did you learn later in life that you wish you would have learned sooner?
I don't know that it would be anything, because everything that I experienced brought me here. And I learned at the pace that was mine to learn. I mean, I've been a deep student of this since I was 22 years old. I think the only thing that I would like to have known, and I think deep down I knew growing up the way that I grew up, to truly know that all was well and that I was okay and I was going to be okay. And I think somewhere I knew that, but to go back and change something that I wished I would have known sooner, I don't know that I would necessarily do that, because it all added up along the way, and it adds up to who I am today.
Oh, and I totally understand it. It's not about changing the past. It's just kind of like, oh, that was my aha, that others might then take forward from there. So it's not meant to rewrite history.
Yeah, so I think to know how cherished I really am.
I like it. If you were to give an 18-year-old one specific piece of wisdom, what would it be?
to not rush it. Yeah, to just savor where you are right now. And that you can't begin to imagine how your life is going to unfold. Trust that there truly is a power at work in and through you. And let yourself dream big and bold. Don't settle. Don't rush it, and don't settle.
And I think at that young age, we're all told, oh, you've got to, find your path and do all these things. And
buckle down.
Yeah, I'm learning to let go. Well, and I've always it's easy to know it. It's hard to do it.
Well, there's the mastery, right? Why you and I, because this is what you do with people with profit, right? And helping them really understand their money. This is why we do what we do, to create a container where people can take information and truly apply it. And that's your genius in terms of helping people apply sound money principles, that they can have the information, but it's a whole nother thing to actually take them and apply them.
That it is. If people would like to learn more about you and your programs, what's the best way for them to do that?
Two ways. One of them, FeliciaSearcy.com, my website. And then I have a gift. Is everything is grounded in vision. I put together a whole vision toolkit where it's a meditation, vision instructions, a daily practice to know what to do with your vision, because that's the foundation of everything. So if you want that, go to FeliciaSearcy.com/spiritual success, and you can have access to that.
And we'll make sure to put those in the show notes.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you, Rocky. I really appreciate it.
Once again, I ask the question, what do you want? Are you clear? And are you willing to do the work? If you are, you're on the right track. I know some of these things seem a bit woo-woo, but I've had so many guests share the same concepts in different ways. Most of them are very successful and have had to overcome themselves. We chat off the recording about more than what you hear. I created clarity on what I wanted in my life and my business, and within a couple of years, I was able to achieve it. It was scary, and I didn't know if it would work out. Now I look back and I laugh. I, for one, am ready to take it up a notch. What about you? Who do you know who could benefit from today's episode and would appreciate if you shared it with them? I know I'd appreciate if you'd share it, so do it for one of us. And thanks. Next week, we've got Bob Elliott, who used to work with Ray Dalio, one of the most successful hedge fund owners out there and a billionaire. And we've had other guests from Ray Dalio's organization. We're going to talk about macro investing and how to look at the big picture. Thank you for listening. Have an abundant week.